Hey, Young Life friends, I'm John. Before we start, I'm going to need you to help me with a few things. All right, are you ready? Great. I want you to go and retrieve an item that you value most. And just to clarify, not something that someone else value most, but what you value most. And I promise I'll still be here on YouTube when you return with that item. So go ahead and click the pause button now, and when you get back, click the play button to continue. Okay, whatever item you retrieved, set it aside for now. For this next part, I want you to grab your Bible, if you have one, a sheet of paper, and a pen. Feel free to pause this video again here until you have those items. Okay, hopefully you were able to obtain those items. On that sheet of paper, I want you to write this down. Do I? Just like this. And go ahead and set that aside for now. Perfect. By the way, I hope everyone is doing okay. Just this past week, I was walking my dog Chance around the block, which I usually do, and out of nowhere, another dog came running towards us, and then a few seconds later, a neighbor came running out of her house, across the street, and onto the sidewalk, yelling for her dog to return. And if you own a dog, you know that chasing after a dog doesn't really help when you're trying to call the dog back to you, right? So it just encourages the dog to run even further away, which is not what you want. So in that moment, I was thinking in my mind, what could I do to help the situation? And the best thing that I thought was to stand still and instruct Chance to sit and stay until the other dog calms down. Enough for the owner to call her dog back. So after 2 to 3 minutes of me standing still and Chance sitting, while the other dog is literally running in circles around us, the owner of that dog was finally able to calm her dog down and capture her dog into her arms. And to be honest, after being in self-isolation for quite some time, that experience definitely brought some needed craziness to my day. So why am I telling you that story? Well, it reminded me of you and I. We are like that hyperactive dog running in circles while Jesus is literally standing still and waiting. And even sometimes, instead of running circles around Jesus, we run in the opposite direction away from Jesus. Especially when we are distracted by fear and confusion, and sometimes we even deny knowing him just to be liked by others, or just so that others won't see us as outsiders. And a great example is right now, while we're all stuck at home, hearing news about people dying and just how bad it is right now. And with that, it is so easy to ask questions like, why God? Why is this happening? Are you even there? The idea of how can I believe in God if he allows this kind of things to happen? So let's open our Bibles to 3 passages in the book of John. I know it's a lot, but I promise it's going to be good. And we are going to look at Simon Peter's account at the Last Supper, when Jesus was arrested and when Jesus appeared to Peter near the shores after his resurrection. So let's look at the first passage, and let's turn to John chapter 13, verses 36 through 38. Simon Peter asked him, "Lord, where are you going?" Jesus replied, "Where am I going? You cannot follow now, but you will follow later." Peter asked, "Lord, why can't I follow you now? I will lay down my life for you." Then Jesus answered, "Will you really lay down your life for me? Very truly, I tell you, before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times. So what's happening in here is that Jesus is literally saying to Peter, hey dude, you are going to deny me, not just once, but 3 times before the rooster crows. And if you think about it, in Peter's mind, he's probably thinking, no way will I disown you, Jesus. Now let's skip ahead to chapter 18, verses 15 through 26. Okay, this passage is quite long, so I'm going to paraphrase for the sake of time. But I do suggest that after you finish watching this video, reread these chapters on your own, and it's worth it, I promise you. Okay, so in this passage, Peter, in 3 separate accounts, after Jesus was arrested, denied the fact that he knew Jesus at all. Sounds familiar, right? And to clarify, Peter is not saying oh, I don't know who Jesus is. Instead, he's claiming that he never was one of the disciples. The first account was with a high priest servant girl that served at the high priest's courtyard. Think of the courtyard like a police station, and where Peter answered the servant girl's question by saying that he was not one of the Jesus' disciples. And one would think if you didn't want to be known as one of Jesus' disciples, you would quietly depart and get away. But instead, he stayed. And while he's around the courtyard, Peter again denied Jesus a second time with some other servant or official. And a third time with the high priest servant who was also near him. But this time, the servant challenged Peter by saying, no, I think I saw you with Jesus in the garden before he was arrested. And Peter replied and said, no. Right as he finished saying no, the rooster began to crow. Have you ever denied Jesus when someone asked you, hey, are you a Christian? Just to be liked by others, or frankly, for your own physical safety, or you just didn't want to be treated differently because you are a Christian. In this moment, I think Peter was doing what many of us would do, look out for ourselves and try to keep a distance from what is happening. And at some point, we start to question our own beliefs and why we follow Jesus to begin with. So going back to what I mentioned earlier about the situation or pandemic that we're all in today, sometimes that fear begins to creep into our minds and we start asking questions like, why God, right? And even maybe thinking, God isn't near. There's no way he's near if I'm seeing and hearing tragic news for the last 4 to 6 weeks. And why can't I go to school, go to work, or do things with friends? And just so you know, it's okay to have these thoughts and questions because we're human. And to be honest, in my life, I've questioned God, especially when I was going through hard times a few years ago. And that brings us to our last chapter in this book. And let's look at chapter 21. Again, this chapter is quite long, so I'll summarize for us. The last part of this book is about Jesus appearing to certain folks after he had conquered death. Specifically, Peter, according to the author. Now, to put this into perspective, this happened 3 days after Jesus was crucified. So while Peter and his friends and 2 other disciples were just fishing, probably trying to figure out what they were going to do now that Jesus was gone. Remember, at this moment, for Peter and the others that were with him, they didn't know that Jesus had resurrected. They were probably thinking, was Jesus who he said he was? Or maybe they were thinking, this can't be it. How can this be? Right? And now we can only assume that between the hours when Jesus died on the cross to when he appeared on shore to Peter and the others, there was definitely a feeling of uncertainty. Like today, the uncertainty for all of us with this virus. Is there a cure? What's going to be the new normal? So while Peter and others were fishing, Jesus suddenly appeared on shore. And he was just standing there and waiting. And at this point, none of them recognized Jesus at all. It's quite interesting that Jesus had to call out to them and asked, any fish? And I'm paraphrasing that. And one of the disciples replied and said, no fish. And Jesus replied with saying, try the right side and see what happens. Doesn't that remind you of the story from the book of Luke where Peter spent an entire night of not being able to catch any fish at all? And then Jesus said to Peter, go back out and try again. It's like with Peter, it takes a few tries in order for him to see Jesus. And you know, we're not all that different. It takes us a while to open our eyes and believe, especially when we are clouded by fear and uncertainty. And at this point, Peter was just probably in his corner trying to figure things out. And the other disciple then said to Peter, it's the Lord. And when Peter heard that, his eyes opened up and decided to swim to shore. We don't know how fast he was swimming, but we can assume he was swimming quite fast, maybe win a few Olympic medals. The other interesting thing about this is that someone who denied Jesus 3 times publicly, Peter's reaction was nothing more than the opposite of what that person would do. Think about it. Wouldn't you feel guilty that you would take your sweet time to get to Jesus? Like a dog that did something wrong and slowly walks towards you with his tail between his legs. Interesting, right? So after they got to shore, they had a meal, and God asked Peter, "Do you love me more than these?" Peter's answer to Jesus was, "Yes, Lord, I love you." Jesus would reply, "Feed my lambs." Again, Jesus asked Peter with the same question a second time, and Peter would say yes. And Jesus would again reply and say, "Take care of my sheep." And one last time he asked Peter the same question, and Peter answered yes. And Jesus said, "Feed my sheep." And then Jesus said, "Follow me." So my question to you is, do you love Jesus more than the item that you value most? And if you do love Jesus more, then know that there is truly hope in what we are going through right now together in this world. And to do what Jesus commands us to do, which is to love one another, Jesus said, "Feed my lambs, take care of my sheep, feed my sheep, and follow me." So what's all of this has to do with the story I shared earlier about Chance and I being chased by another dog, and also the crisis that we're all experiencing right now? Well, those are great questions. So whenever you are feeling like things are out of control, remember that God is in control, and He is standing there and waiting for us to seek after Him. That means not running in circles or running away. Instead, He wants us to be still and our eyes on Him. And for what we're going through right now, we can easily feel lost and just question about our identity in Christ. And sometimes we focus way too much into our own situation that we forget about our neighbors, our friends, the people that we love, while God is commanding us to love others in all situations. And especially during a crisis, by loving others, we are saying yes to God. So on that sheet of paper that I asked you to write down, do I want you to finish it with this. Do I love Jesus more than this? And in the blank with the item that you grabbed earlier. For this week, I want you to think about that question. And if you answer yes, I do love Jesus more, then I challenge you to do this with your phone each day for the next 5 days. Text someone that you know and tell them that you miss and you love them. And if you want to surprise someone, maybe order that person a pizza or create a TikTok video for them. Love you all and stay safe.